It's still absolutely a male-dominated world. It is still absolutely a lot of good old boy network.
I was introduced to him, turned and spoke with our mutual friend, and when I looked back at my soon-to-be new boss, he was looking me up and down from head to toe.
I think in some senses gender is always an issue when you're in a closed society. I say that to say this: gender was an issue if you let it become one.
In the long and arduous journey in search of equality, women in America have much to be proud of. 3 Secretaries of State, a Secretary of Homeland Security, a Chief of Police in the nation's capital, and countless other senior and influential positions in society. All have been held by women. But things haven't always been so great for those who make up more than half of the population. The deliberate absence of women from the Constitutional Convention in 1787 ensured that even to the present day there would be no constitutional guarantee of equality for women. The right to vote would not be won until 1920. And half a century later, there were not only men in America who openly espoused that a woman's proper place was in the home, but there were many who willfully stigmatized those women who dared to attempt to balance a career with a family. Despite overcoming these obstacles, this journey is far from over. Even today, in 2009, much work remains to be done to ensure that working women are treated the same as their male counterparts. Although women can now aspire to do anything and be anything they want, they still earn only 77 cents for every dollar paid to their male colleagues. Adding insult to injury is the fact that when a woman gets married and has children, she can expect fewer job opportunities and lower pay. When a man gets married and has children, he can expect the exact opposite. Yes, things certainly are changing, but the question is, have they changed?
I have been in the workforce for over 30 years now, and it's amazing the differences that I see, particularly for women in the workforce. When I started, it was just standard operating procedure that a woman was going to get hit on. And one of the skills you had to develop as a woman if you wanted to succeed was how to say no effectively and very clearly without getting fired. It was a really interesting time, and that was just standard operating procedure, and every woman knew it, and women ahead of you hopefully helped you understand the scenario and the situation and how to deal with that. Today, it's a different world, thank goodness. That has definitely improved. I'm not saying that there still aren't predators out there, I'm sure there are, but sexual harassment cases and awareness has definitely advanced, and women today have recourse. The government in particular is really good about educating their workforce that there are appropriate parameters and sexual harassment is not allowed or abided. And that's a wonderful thing for women entering the workforce now and moving up within the ranks of the workforce.
I entered the workforce, the Department of Defense, in 1980. In 1980, things were very different in the Air Force. I entered specifically the federal law enforcement because there were so few women, and it was an interesting career field, always has been. I spent 27 years doing that. When I was a young officer, there were very few women mentors because there were very few senior women in the Air Force, specifically in my field. And I asked one lady that was retiring how she would recommend the career field. And she said, if you're interested in law enforcement and what you do, stay in it. If you're interested in promotion, get out. She was probably a little off, or it was probably accurate for her. She was a major at the time, so she was 15 years ahead of me. So she probably faced some real competition and closed doors.
I started working in the intelligence and national security field in 1986. I was a graduate student at the University of Maryland, and my first real job was at the Institute for Defense Analysis. I think I really came in blind. I never really thought that I was in any way going to be treated differently than my male counterparts. Although I think I got a little bit of an awakening on one of my first interviews out of graduate school. It was with a defense contractor. And as a graduate student, I was under the impression that I could come in and work as an analyst, and was told by the person who interviewed me that they had plenty of secretaries who had master's degrees working in his office. That's when I pretty much decided I didn't want to work in his office. But I made the move into government, and I have to be honest with you, even during the Cold War times, working in the Navy, I had tremendous, most of my bosses were men, but most of them were very supportive of me and my career and most of my counterparts. So I really didn't, I came in, I think I was fortunate. I came in at a time where I was treated pretty fairly, or at least I thought I was treated fairly.
It used to be even when I had my first command that at commanders' conferences I was the only woman in the room. Now if I'm the only woman in the room, I find it surprising, as do most people in the room. It has become more and more rare for that to be an occurrence.
Prior to my career in Homeland Security, I actually was in the medical field. So I'm trained in medicine. And I can remember being a resident and working alongside colleagues who were definitely men. And in one particular instance, I was on a rotation during my residency, and it was a very, very long surgery. And I was rotating through that department, so I really didn't have to be there. But I felt obligated to be there and to participate because the sense that my male colleagues were looking at me differently. And so some of them, said in surprise, well, I'm really surprised that you're still here. And I was like, well, why would you be surprised?
I came into service in 1975 as a uniformed police officer. What's curious about that is I was 19 years old. I was an undergraduate student at Northeastern University and carrying a gun before I was legally old enough to buy one. Wearing a uniform really puts you in a position to understand how to deal with people because a uniform is a magnet. People are attracted to the uniform for a variety of reasons. Sometimes in those days it was out of curiosity. You didn't see very many women in policing uniforms. Sometimes it was for a sense of direction, for a sense of help. But it gave you an opportunity to deal up close and in a personal way with members of the public. We did assignments like court security, transport of prisoners, transport of methadone for heroin addicts, handling of informants, and those kinds of things for other federal agencies. That wasn't our specific mission. We would just transport informants and witnesses and things like that. When I graduated from college, I went into the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. At that juncture, that was 1978, we had 12 women on the job. It went down, I think, at the lowest point in their history to about 6, and now they're at about 10 or 12%. So I think the biggest change then, or the biggest obstacle then, were there were no female mentors. There were no senior women to go and say, how do I do this? How do I fit in? How do I learn the most? What kind of things should I be thinking about and doing? In the early days, there weren't a lot of male mentors either, because there was a reluctance, I think, at that juncture to engage with young women. They were the thinking about it, I guess, the outliers, just because there weren't very many.
Another big change that I've noticed, the stigma of, well, because you're a woman, particularly if you're a young woman, you're going to be getting married, or you're recently married and you're going to have babies and you're not going to be around long. So I'm not going to give you that promotion because you're not going to work as hard. I'm not going to pay you as fairly because you're not going to be around, so I don't need to incentivize you like that. I literally had someone sit across from me, offer me a job. I knew the gentleman that had had that job before me and what he was being paid. And this fellow that was getting ready to hire me offered me a salary 2/3 of what the previous salary had been. And I said, hey, Jim made X amount. Why are you only paying me this? He looked me in the eye and he flat out said, because you're going to be getting married soon and getting pregnant, you're not even going to stick around. I don't need to pay you like I paid Jim. That would never happen today.
Many of my colleagues were very leery about talking about their personal life. They didn't come into work and talk about daycare or school or the soccer game. Whereas for our male counterparts, that was almost a bonding, evolution. So I guess I can see that. I'm happy to say that I think that's changed. Certainly over the last 10 years, I would say. Again, and I'm an example of it. I have 2 children. I've made it very clear in every position I've moved into that I have 2 kids and that I'm going to go to soccer games and on field trips, and but that my work will never suffer as a result. I've never hidden the fact that I have a family and a personal life. And I don't think it's necessarily hurt me, but it probably did for my peers.
I remember my mom, they have these standardized tests that you take to tell you what you're going to be in a career. And when I took those standardized tests, because of my organizational skill and my strategic thinking, it came back that I would be a great administrative assistant or secretary. And my mom took it, and all my life I wanted to be a doctor. And so my mom took that piece of paper, she took me to the trash can in the kitchen, and she tore up that piece of paper and said, this is what we think about this, and you can do whatever you want to do.
I have 2 sisters, so it's 3 girls in a Southern family a lot of years ago. And we were taught from day one that we should get a job, we should focus on getting a career. We were absolutely all going to college. That was not an if you go to college, it's when you go to college. And the path to college was rigorous study and work and learning and understanding that your goal is to find a career that you're passionate about and learning how to take care of yourself.
I grew up in the mid-50s, born in 1955, and in those years the women received lots of feedback. Young girls received lots of feedback. You grow up and be a school teacher or grow up and be a nurse. And my mother was a nurse, and what's interesting is I guess in my older years I've become the teacher that my father wanted me to be. But I grew up with 4 brothers, and there was no expectation that I would go into a profession other than those 2 I mentioned. But I was constantly reinforced that I could change the world. I had to work hard. I had lots of older aunts that said, listen, we lived through some tough times in the Depression, we lived through the wars, women play a strong role, you can change the world. Work hard, study hard in school. I know it sounds trite, but it was really important. You can change the world. When I look at young women entering the workforce today, I see a broader skill set than reflecting on my own entry to the workforce. I see, well, I think we all share enthusiasm and patience and tenacity and passion. But I see an expectation that they can in fact change the world. I didn't necessarily have that reinforcement entering the workforce, I had it in the home front. And now I think they are coming into the workforce so excited about what their potential is. They don't have an expectation that if I come in and work for the government, I'll stay there for 30 years, which is something that was reinforced with me. They know that they can try different experiences. They're coming in at a higher educational level. So it's not just a baccalaureate degree, it's a master's degree, it's a postdoc degree, that they're coming in, they've done other kinds of things, now they want to come to the government, they want to come to law enforcement, they want to come to intelligence because they have such a passion and a sense of mission.
I am very grateful to my parents and to the sort of, I know what the message society was providing. I never got that message. I had a mother and father who encouraged me to do and be whatever I wanted to be. I was told I could be a ditch digger, I could be a lawyer, I could be a trash person, but whatever I was going to be the best at it. And they did everything they could to give me those opportunities. I can't tell you how valuable that sort of structure and support was for me, because I never once thought, well, I have to be a secretary to get a job. As I mentioned in my story, as soon as that person told me that they had secretaries at that organization, I walked out of there knowing I will never work there. And to this day, I would never work for that, in that organization again, based on that one experience. And so I have to say, I never really thought that I couldn't do something because I was a woman. Still don't think that.
When it comes to dressing for success, opinions seem to differ on two fronts. First, young women entering the workforce seem confused about what is considered acceptable clothing for a very conservative Homeland Security workplace. Yet many of the men in that very workforce are confused when it comes to understanding what they can and cannot say about a woman's appearance. In fact, in one recent incident witnessed by Homeland Security Television, a group of senior male Homeland Security executives commented on the appearance of a young woman, saying that she not only looked very nice that day, but that she looked very professional as well. The woman appeared flustered and confused about how to respond to such a comment, as if to say, why wouldn't I look professional?
I think part of my perspective, because I've been in this workforce for so long, and it's so much better than it used to be, things like that are so low on the Richter scale. But you're right, absolutely there is still this perception that women are sex objects. So it's okay to comment on the way they're dressed.
I think very quickly on my feet, and so my response to them probably would have been, don't I look professional every day? I think I just was reared with a different level of confidence to be able to go after what I want and not be afraid to say what's on my mind. And I think a lot of times that when you exude that level of confidence, it gets around some of the challenges that you might normally face.
It's fine to tell somebody when they look nice. Because frankly, I've had men are confused in the workplace about what they can and can't say. And I had a very smart man that I used to work with who said, if you would say it to my wife or my daughters, then say it. If you wouldn't, then don't. And that's, frankly, pretty good advice.
Now, what's even worse is when women, either out of ignorance or naivety, dress inappropriately, but rather than tell them, people just talk about them behind their back. And these so-called experts, 50 and older, they'll ogle them. They might be on the first list to be fired. They certainly are not on the first list to be promoted, but they never tell them what the situation is and what the problem is. So yes, men still have this problem of treating women inappropriately. It's a lot less offensive than it used to be, but it absolutely still exists.
Of course, there is nothing wrong with being a woman in Homeland Security, or for that matter, being an attractive woman in Homeland Security. The problem, according to some women, seems to be that some men assume incorrectly that attractive, outgoing women who attend professional networking and educational events are interested in something other than networking and other than educational advancement.
I actually was a part of an online network of females, and one of the questions that was posed was, how do I deal when I go to networking events and I'm there to take care of business, but people want to hit on me?
Have I heard of difficulties in networking social events, or women being afraid that they would not be taken seriously and might be asked out versus asked to do business? I think that's part of life, and I think, again, it comes to your ability to be comfortable in yourself know why that you're going there to learn from someone else. And the biggest compliment you can give to another person, male or female, is, tell me what you do. Teach me about your profession. And it puts things back on a business line.
We've been doing mentoring events as well, and after the first one, I actually indicated that we may do another one with men. And the feedback I got from almost every woman in that room was, no, please don't. And maybe that's to that point. You know, their argument was it changes the dynamic. You know, we can leave this open to men to participate, but please, you know, keep the focus on women. As a result, our next event is the 1st of December, and it's going to be all women. I think we're going to keep inviting a senior male to come and speak, only because I think it's important to get, you know, both a male and female perspective. But we'll largely keep it mostly women.
But does flirting at professional networking events ever cross the line? Well, history has shown us that it certainly has happened more than it should, and it can be particularly stressful when a woman is overtly harassed by a man who is in a position of authority. Fortunately, such incidents are rare today, but they still happen, and the memories of the period when they happened frequently are still fresh in the minds of the women who have persevered.
I was a first lieutenant at the time, so I had been in the Air Force for 3 years when I came into the Office of Special Investigations and Federal Law Enforcement. I was to be introduced to my new commander by a mutual friend, and I met him at a function, at a formal function, and he was a colonel in the United States Air Force, and I was introduced to him, turned and spoke with our mutual friend, and when I looked back at my soon-to-be new boss, he was looking me up and down from head to toe. Not only did it make me cringe, but it also made me fear for my position in the organization. And increasingly so. The good news was that we were in 2 different locations, but then subsequently I was the second officer at my unit, and I was offered command when my previous commander departed. I really had some soul searching to do to determine whether I could do that working for this man, and of course when you come in the military as an officer, what you want to be is the commander. That is why you come in, and that is your dream job, and that's what you're for. That's what all your training's about. And I knew in every way I was capable of performing that duty, but my concern was, if ever I was put in a position with that man of sexual harassment of some kind, then I couldn't see any winning that situation. Even if I was right, which I would have been before I made any accusation of the kind, it would still be that young so-and-so, and look what she did to him. So there was some real soul searching that went on. At that point, I decided I had really no choice but to accept the command, because that's what I was there for. I did make a bargain with the individuals who worked for me, and we worked it out so that I would never be alone with the commander. All the men that worked for me, I was their first female commander, and so I think it was a little eye-opening for them too to have to, but they saw what I saw, so it wasn't that they thought I was making it up or being frivolous or silly in any way. They saw it too, and were accepting of the fact that I had to work around it, and they helped me.
The question about whether the pantsuit was the great equalizer, let me tell you a story and then let me give you a response. I can remember being in 7th grade when they changed the rules in my junior high school that women could wear pants or slacks to school. And it caused great consternation in my own house because my father didn't think that that was acceptable. Of course, I prevailed and won the battle. And to me, at 7th grade, that seemed to be a big thing. In a professional world, I wouldn't look at it as an equalizer at all. I frequently wore pantsuits, but it was because I had a weapon to disguise, to hide, handcuffs, radios, other tools of the trade that weren't so easy to disguise when wearing a skirt suit. But I never looked at it as an equalizer. I looked at it sometimes for comfort, sometimes for travel purposes, but for me personally, never looked at it as a great equalizer.
In general, if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I mean, I have pantsuit on now, I would probably tend to be in pants. Now, it depends on where you work. Frankly, it bothers me a little that I probably would tend to be in pants, and therefore it's taken away one of my options as far as how to dress, and that's being dictated to me in some way. But then I don't like to be dictated to, which means I'll probably wear a skirt tomorrow. But there's some give and take there, and if the most important thing to you on any given day is having your position heard, then maybe that's a sacrifice, and frankly, I believe it is a sacrifice.
What I've noticed with younger people, in particular with the younger women, they're not as conscious of that image and the professionalism in their dress. Even when they come to interview with me, a woman, they don't necessarily dress professionally. If I can get another really important message to people entering the workforce, especially if you're thinking of working in the government and Homeland Security, which is a conservative industry. It is a conservative industry. Let me say that again. You must dress professionally. You must be aware that what you wear absolutely is going to impact the person that you're meeting with, for good or ill. That's just how it is. So you also don't want to be having lots of piercings. You don't want a red streak in your hair or a pink streak in your hair. You have to be conscious that you're dealing with a conservative audience.
And so, of course, how you dress and how you present is one thing as a role model, but if they look at you as old women dress that way, young women dress this way, I'm a young woman, you need to have the conversation with them, clearly, because men do judge, and other women do, frankly, judge based on attire and hair and how you keep yourself and how you present yourself. It's really important.
What I would tell women today entering into the Homeland Security workforce is first, get the knowledge and the experience that you need. Secondly, is to have the confidence that is going to take you through the workplace to be successful. If the two core points I would say is competence and confidence. And those would be the two qualities, skills, or abilities that I would say would bring success in this area.
I think the future is bright for our girls.
John Wayne said one time, sometimes you just can't explain stupid. So sometimes if you're confronted with ignorance, you walk away from it. There's lots of opportunities to meet a lot of smart people doing great things.
It's absolutely easier to be a woman in government today where there have been significant inroads and there are a lot of wonderful role models and a lot of successes.
The men that I know in the Homeland fields understand the importance of a diverse workforce, are vocal about it, are doing things to assist recruiting and to assist women moving forward.